Okay, welcome everybody. This is the webinar on how to apply ERA's Umbrella Species Stewardship Protocol. We're going to give a couple minutes to everyone to join, and then we will get started in a couple minutes. Just for everyone to know, we have a Q&A feature activated for the webinar. So if you have any questions, you won't be able to open your microphone, but we do invite you to insert your questions into the chat. And then at the end of the webinar, we will have about 10 minutes to go through the Q&A. So I do invite you to answer or ask your questions through the Q&A feature. So I think we're going to go ahead and get started. People will be joining in as we go, but time is of the essence. So we have a jam-packed schedule today with great presentations. Today we're going to be starting with Josh Brand, who is going to talk about the comparability framework for biodiversity credits. Josh is the technical coordinator at the Biodiversity Credit Alliance. Then we will be hearing from Giselle Booman, the chief scientist at Regen Network, who will be discussing the protocol development process that we went through. And we'll be wrapping it up with Olivia Marks, who is the CEO at ERA. And she will be showing how to apply the biodiversity stewardship credit protocol from protocol to practice. So looking at the equations, looking at the step-by-step, and how to really bring those rules and requirements into practice. And then we'll end with a Q&A session. So just a bit about ERA, for those of you who don't know us, we are a women-led company, and we develop different types of impact credits to regenerate our ecosystems. So we work with carbon credits from conservation and restoration. We develop women's empowerment credits from agroforestry systems and training and increasing incomes of women. And today, obviously, we will be learning more about the biodiversity credits and the biodiversity crediting protocol that ERA created together with Regen. So how did we get here? Well, in 2022, ERA won a grant from the Regen Network, and we were tasked to build a biodiversity crediting protocol. And our goal was really to focus on protection, so paying for protection of existing biodiverse habitat. Because we came from the background of REDD+ project development and saw a lot of challenges and frustrations in that process, so to speak, and a lot of forests that were excluded because they didn't have, let's say, this deforestation pressure, but they still add value and they still have ecosystem services, and they still should be allowed to receive payments for ecosystem services. So instead of looking at this through the carbon lens, we're looking at it through the biodiversity lens. And really what we wanted to do is use the umbrella species as an indicator of ecosystem health and an indicator of biodiversity. Because if the umbrella species is there, then there's a whole web of life in that habitat, meaning that there's high biodiversity. So just really quickly, some 5 core principles of our biodiversity crediting protocol. It's inclusive, so any terrestrial ecosystem type that is home to an umbrella species can apply our methodology and our protocol. And particularly, we wanted to make it inclusive for Indigenous peoples and local communities, because many of their forests don't have these deforestation pressures and are excluded from carbon credits and REDD+ mechanisms. We wanted it easy to adopt, so we have a lower cost to barrier compared to carbon projects, and it's easier. All you need is a camera trap and a picture of the animal in your property, and you are ready to start applying the methodology. It's practice-based, versus outcomes based. So it's not about seeing more of that umbrella species over time. It's about becoming a better steward. So this notion of applying practices to improve the threats to biodiversity and improve the habitat and the health of those umbrella species. The price is also not defined by external supply and demand. The price is defined by the cost of conservation, and that is transparent. So the costs are transparently shown, and it creates this fair pricing mechanism, because at the end of the day, the land stewards need their costs to be, covered. If the price is this arbitrary number that doesn't actually get the land steward to cover their costs, then we're not really making a system that makes sense. And lastly, once purchased, the credits are immediately retired, meaning that there's no secondary markets allowed. So no buying and selling to avoid that arbitrage. So this is the protocol from a high level of how we got here. And I'm really excited to sort of dive into the details today. And I'd like to pass it over now to Josh, who is going to provide some information on the biodiversity credit comparability framework. So over to you, Josh.
Great. Thank you very much, Hannah. It is nice to be here. Thanks to Eric Brazil and Hannah for hosting this webinar and inviting me to participate. So let me just get my presentation up and running. Okay, so I'm going to give kind of the 30,000 foot view of looking at a starting point for different methodologies, different crediting protocols. So I think we're going to get down into a little bit more of the details of the Arab Brazil protocol here at the end of by the end of this session. So I'm going to start out at kind of the higher level, talking about different attributes that different biodiversity credits may have, and how we think about comparing those or understanding the difference between them. And so first, just a quick mention or overview about the Biodiversity Credit Alliance for any of you who may not be familiar with the Biodiversity Credit Alliance. We are a UN-backed coalition of like-minded organizations working to shape the future of the biodiversity credit market, bringing together scientific experts, conservation practitioners, and businesses to establish a high-integrity, transparent, and scalable biodiversity credit market. And so we're really working to ensure that as the biodiversity credit market develops, it is securely generating positive outcomes for biodiversity and for people. We have a number of different roles in terms of serving as kind of a think tank for the market in some ways, partnering with other organizations that are also working to develop and provide contributions to the market, and also working through providing guidance and also building a community of practice. So we have a couple of different bodies or parts of the Biodiversity Credit Alliance. We have the BCA Task Force, which is a 20 organization leadership body that's the main decision-making body for the BCA. We have the BCA Forum, which is our knowledge network and community of practice, which has more than 500 organizations. And the membership for both of those bodies is on an organizational basis, not on an individual basis. So anybody here who is not already, whose organization is not already a member of the BCA Forum, I invite you to make that application. It is free of charge. It's just a quick submission of information on our website. So definitely check that out. We had our 18th BCA Forum meeting this morning, a little earlier today, a couple of hours ago, and had a great presentation by Regen Network at that. So we use that network to really disseminate information and share the BCA newsletter and share information about different things happening in the biodiversity credit market and what BCA is working on. So then another key part of the BCA is the International Environment Guardians, which is our consultative body of Indigenous peoples and local communities and Afro-descendants. That's a key part of everything that we do, and we strongly consult with our IEG colleagues on BCA outputs and guidance documents and things like that. And then we have the BCA Secretariat, which is the coordinating and process day-to-day activity functioning of the BCA, of which I am a part. So so when we talk about the biodiversity credit market, one of the key questions that comes up and is really a fundamental question around the biodiversity credit market is the issue of fungibility and the diversity of biodiversity, which is what's fantastic about it, but it's different than carbon in that it's not a fungible aspect. 1 ton of biodiversity in the ocean is not the same as 1 ton of biodiversity on land. An elephant is not equal to a whale, and we don't even measure biodiversity in tons, obviously. So, given that broad and complex focus of what we were trying to do here, how do we manage that and how do we deal with that? And there are actually more than 50 different methodologies and protocols for generating biodiversity credits, and that's great. I'm sure that number will continue to grow and reflect a lot of the sorry, just getting pinged over here. I'm just going to try to turn the volume off there. Will reflect all the different conservation outcomes that we're actually trying to achieve in biodiversity around at the global level. So is that a problem? How do you have a market without fungible units? It's actually not that big of a deal. There's a lot of markets globally around the world that don't function on fungible units. That's actually more of an exception, I think, than a rule. So any of the consumer-based markets for consumer goods, one of the examples we like to use is the automobile market. There are many different types of cars and trucks and vehicles, and they have many different prices, but yet it's still one market altogether that people and consumers are able to engage with, able to make decisions on, and have some basis for making selection. So how do biodiversity credit buyers choose what to buy? As I was mentioning, there's many different attributes and many different types of biodiversity credits. Those different types of biodiversity credits have different prices and support different claims about what the conservation outcomes are that they are contributing to. And so buyers really need clarity and transparency about the different attributes of biodiversity credits in order to compare them and to make informed decisions about what biodiversity credits best suit their business case, their use case, and their needs. So, basically whether they need or are looking to buy the smart car biodiversity credits or the Land Rover biodiversity credits, the Toyota biodiversity credits, whatever the case may be. So, how do they make those decisions? We have identified a number of attributes that are useful for comparing biodiversity credits. I think I would say, first of all, though, that all biodiversity credits should conform with key principles, high-level principles of quality, integrity, and equity. And the BCA has worked together with partners, including the International Advisory Panel on Biodiversity Credits, IAPB, and the World Economic Forum to produce a guidance document on high-level principles for the biodiversity credit market that is available on our website, and we'll be launching the updated version of that in the next week or two, or maybe even today. It may have gone live already. So that's available on our website. There had been a discussion document about that released at COP16 last year, and now we've gotten to sort of the next final version of that. That will continue to be a living document, updated as necessary, but it is now in the current form to be disseminated to the market. So, that set of high-level principles provides the foundational element for all aspects of the biodiversity credit market, and all biodiversity credits methodologies and protocols should align with that. I would also mention that we have just developed a sort of a zero draft testing mechanism or self-assessment framework and tool for credit suppliers and crediting methodologies to actually assess the degree of application or degree of alignment with of any given crediting methodology with the high-level principles. So I just wanted to mention that. So then again, what attributes of biodiversity credits distinguish one credit from another? And also importantly, what attributes of biodiversity credits are important in the context of market? Like, we don't need to know necessarily at the surface level every single detail of every single methodology. You don't need to know the details of how your car's engine is designed and works when you're buying that compared to another car. You need to know and understand sort of the key elements that you're interested in. So what are the attributes that are important in the context of the market? And then, again, what attributes of biodiversity credits are buyers likely to be interested in? What's important for meeting different business needs and, addressing claims or meeting targets that different buyers may be interested in meeting. So how can we develop a framework or tool that will provide a standardized way of describing biodiversity credits? So that is our proposed comparability framework for biodiversity credits, which is built on a consultative process that we had in 2024 and going back to the late 2023 around metrics of measurement and different attributes and different types of credits. So summarized here in this table are the 24 data points and attributes that we think would be important for disclosure and effectively communicating and comparing one type of biodiversity credit to another. I'm not going to go through all those now in detail, but that will be further explained and summarized in the report that will be coming out, the discussion paper that will be coming out on the comparability framework in the coming weeks. So one key thing just to touch on to be further explored in relation to understanding the differences between different biodiversity credits is the linkage between price and the claims conveyed by different credits. Ultimately that is a question around the return on investment for conservation dollars. And so, we need to know and understand what is the actual cost of conservation. That's something that historically the conservation realm has done actually a very bad job of documenting and publicizing and disclosing. That varies greatly around the world depending on different types of conservation approaches and different types of outcomes. But it's something that if we want this market to function, we actually really need to dive into and to, have the consumer, the buyer for biodiversity credits, be able to get familiar with those price and outcomes relationships and be able to understand what is the value of their dollar going toward a biodiversity credit. And so that's, a key area that we're going to be working on, and we would invite collaboration on, and I'm sure we'll continue to work with some of the partners here today. So, as I said, just to make an informed decision, just like buying a car, buyers need to understand those price and value relationships. So I think that is about it. Just to, I think that's in my slideshow. So thank you everybody for your attention, and happy to have any questions or comments during the question and answer session. So I will hand over to Giselle.
Thank you, Joshua. So I'll start presenting now. Here's my, here we are. Do you all see my presentation? Yes?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I'm Giselle Bullman. I'm the Chief Scientist and Latin American Growth Person point of contact in Regen network. And I'd like to share a little bit about how this process of creating a protocol and hand-holding ERA went, and how it looks like for the protocol developer to create a protocol in Regen network, and how we help achieve a certain level of rigor and integrity for the protocols, and how the process continues in order to issue credits ultimately. So let's start with a little bit of, this is just an outline of what we are going to be touching on. I'd like to go over a little bit on the Regen Networks program, the protocol approval process, the project plan and monitoring reports verification and approval through Regen Network. Then we have credits issued, and I want to show everyone how it looks like to have a credit issued on the marketplace and with all the project pages and one functionality that we offer, which is the data stream. That it allows to anchor all this information, the specific information of the projects into the Regen ledger. So talking a little bit about the Regen program first, I just want to make sure that I clearly state that the Regen ledger is not prescriptive to the Regen Networks program. So we created this program in order to offer a flexible standard that could allow for project developers like ERA to create their own protocols in their own terms and with an agile process with us in order to achieve the market demand and the market standards on time and with their own context. So here I share just a QR if anyone is interested in skimming through our program. It is essentially a standard, and it provides with all the key structure and guidance for creating protocols, for issuing credits, for registering new projects, and etc. All the legal framework as well. So once we share this framework or guidance, what we call the program guide to ERA, we started hand-holding them with the review of the protocol. So the first step is for a protocol developer is to bring a draft to the Regen scientific team and the registry team. So this team checks for compliance with the overhacking program guide, and it also checks for the science and for the specific definition of the units and many features that have to do with the credit integrity and how it's going to be represented both in the ledger and to the eyes of a buyer, for instance, in the market. So we have a set of experts in science and in carbon markets and biodiversity markets in order to make sure that the protocols achieve a certain level of integrity and rigor so that they match the demand side needs. After this iterative process, we started an expert peer review process. So once the internal Regen team approves this for external peer review, it's passed over external reviewers that are experts in the markets and experts in science. And after that, once there's some iterations, depending on how much the original protocol needs to be corrected, then it goes into a public comment period. So to see how some of these things look like, I want to show, if you look into the right of my screen, you will see that there's a document history. And what we do is we record every single step from the submission of the protocol, the draft versions, the new versions that become reviewed, and all the reviews from the internal team and from the experts that could be anonymous or not. It all becomes public, and you can go and skim through the website of the project and access all the different documents. If you scan this QR, you will be able to see the whole process of the ERA's protocol approval, and you can go into tracking older versions, for instance, of the protocol if you're curious. In terms of the internal scientific review that I mentioned, you can also check the comments and the resolution and the answers from the ERA team and how they addressed the specific comments coming from the scientific team and the registry team at Regen Network. And then you can also track the same for the expert reviewers. And in terms of the public comment period, this is about 2 weeks that we open in different platforms, depending on what the consultation is. We use Hilo and we use Commonwealth for different types of consulting, and maybe Commonwealth is more related to Web3 and the ledger specifics of the credit units that are being created. Once all is done and everything is approved, it becomes a new protocol listed in our website as one of the protocols. In term of the project plan and the monitoring reports, we follow a similar process where everything is going to be anchored on chain and it's going to be tracked. So essentially, the registry agents, which could be myself and some other team members, once we get a document that is the project plan, we check that it follows exactly the requirements specified in the ERA protocol, and we also check for compliance with the overhanging program guide that lives within the Regen Networks program. So by checking for completeness and checking for compliance, we then are ready to send this over to the third-party verifiers. This way, we make sure that all the information and all the data that is required through the protocol is then available. And here we go with the final kind of more the user interface software that we created. So we have all this underlying digital infrastructure that is pinging everything in the ledger. How do we make that accessible for everyone? Well, we created an interface that it's super easy. You can scan there also and check for ERA's project pages and what we call the data stream. The data stream is what you can see here in the right. It's a chronological a timeline that allows for the project developers to start uploading specific metadata, specific data related to the project. It could be something that it's required in the protocol, like the monitoring reports and the project plan approval and the verifier approval, everything that is more like required. But it could also be that they want to post camera traps proving the presence of jaguars in certain projects. And so they would just submit that as easy as posting something on Instagram. So you can create your project page very intuitively, very user-friendly. And by having a wallet on the ledger, you can just anchor everything on chain. And that creates an immutable record of whatever data and metadata is uploaded. The same system underlies behind the scenes for the issuance of the credits, the transactions, the status of the credits, whether they are retired or they are just issued. All of that is super important, and all the metadata associated with a credit unit is going to be living in the Regen ledger as well. So there's going to be a unique identifier in the code, in the software, that it's going to allow for instance, avoiding double counting, even if the same credit unit is sold in different marketplaces. So the Regen ledger supports different marketplaces, different protocols. And talking a little bit about, I wanted to bring this, what just Joshua was showing. All of this, I think all of these 24 data points and attributes that he was just mentioning are exactly the ones I was skimming through, but I think they are all the ones that we highlight in the project pages, and we encourage our project developers to upload. So ERA created a beautiful project page, and the data related to which is the protocol version, and how many credits are on sale, and which ones have been retired, and the issuance date, and everything that's related to the projects is all there. You can skim and you can find all the information there. So I think we are super aligned with this, and it would be great to kind of go over and see if there needs to be some tweaks and adjustments, but I was compelled to see this. Just one final thing, because we are working oftentimes with indigenous communities and local communities that require certain pieces of information to be private. I just wanted to mention that in the data stream and in the project pages, there's a possibility to keep everything private and just anchor and chain the specific information. And with a key, the project developer or the administrator of the project page could be allowing certain people to access the information and not other, and that would also be managed. So with that, I think I would just leave this QR if people want to learn more about Regen Network, and just say that it was a beautiful process with Hannah and Olivia, and we super appreciate the way that they have always shown up, and this collaborative process really was amazing. So a lot of kudos and appreciation to the team and to this big effort, because I think it was in a record time that they developed all these complex, unique, and very sophisticated protocol.
Thank you so much, Giselle. We appreciate the kudos. And right back at you. It was a pleasure working with the Regen team. And yeah, we had a great time. So now let's switch gears over to actually diving into the protocol, where Olivia will be walking us through the step-by-step. So please take it away, Oli.
Thank you. I'm going to share my screen. Just a second. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, let's go. So first of all, thank everyone who devoted some time to being here and listening to us. My name is Olivia Marques. I am Head of Operations at ERA, a project developer specialized in nature-based solutions. Today, my intention is to talk about the biodiversity credits from protocol to practice. The presentation has two parts. In the first part, we will discuss the biodiversity protocol and calculations. And in the second part, we will discuss the roadmap step by step towards credit issuance. The biodiversity protocol, as Giselle just said, is under the Regen platform, which has various methodologies related to nature-based solutions that can be used. The protocol was built over 3 years, involving a variety of professionals, with peer reviews and public consultation period, as Giselle just said. It can be downloaded through this QR code, and any project developer, landowner, company, or professional can download the document and apply the protocol. To begin this presentation, it's important to explain how the protocol works and start saying that there are more than 50 biodiversity methodologies out there, as Joshua just mentioned in his presentation. Siemens at Bloom Labs has done a pretty good job mapping most of these methodologies. Some methodologies use high conservation value areas as the main criteria, while others use threatened ecosystems or indicator species. This biodiversity protocol uses the term umbrella species as the main criteria. So why umbrella species, right? Umbrella species integrate a complex food chain and are essential for the systemic balance of several other species, contributing to the conservation of an entire ecosystem. They generally have large habitat needs, requiring extensive areas for survival, and are key to the ecosystem, long-lived and sensitive to environmental changes. Once the protocol is applied and verified, it generates a biodiversity credit, which we are calling here an umbrella species stewardship credit. Using this protocol, one credit represents 1 hectare of habitat steward for 1 year. The formula used the number of hectares as habitat area criteria, multiplied by stewardship factors such as umbrella species health, habitat quality, and theory of change interventions. We will talk more about these 3 factors in the next slides. The umbrella species health has as its main criteria the presence of an umbrella species. So if the project does not have any evidence of the umbrella species presence in the area, it cannot apply this biodiversity protocol. It could be a photo from a trap camera, a footprint, eDNA, or any evidence as long as it have geographic coordinates. The more monitoring methods are used, the higher the umbrella species health factor and consequently the number of credits. And the other 2 criteria that are mandatory in the umbrella species health are size of population, which scores 1 per individual in the area, and movement and distribution, which scores 1 per individual monitored in the area, using, for example, radio collars, which are well-known technology used for this purpose. The habitat quality has 2 criteria. The first is community composition, which means assessing the area's taxonomic diversity. Mammal inventory is mandatory and score 1. And increasing the number of seasons and groups inventoried increases the score. The second criteria is ecosystem disturbance, which address how the project acts when a disturbance event, such as fire, happens in the project area. If there is a disturbance and the project implements post-event strategies to mitigate the damage, it scores 1. If there is a disturbance and no action, it scores 0. And if there is a disturbance event, if there is no disturbance event, it scores 2 because we are assuming that good prevention strategies were taken in the project area. Finally, there is the theory of change, which includes designing a strategy that considers the threats that the umbrella species face in the project area. It includes outcomes, outputs, activities, and indicators that will be used by the project. Each activity design will be valued with 1 point, and the score will be 1 point per activity implemented. So let me give you an example of a credit calculation for a hypothetical project. In this simulation, the project area has 40,000 hectares. Let's say that this area has a camera trap, evidence of the presence of a jaguar, so it scores 2 on presence. It also has a verifiable population of 5 jaguars in the area, so it scores 5 in size of population. It has 1 jaguar with a radio collar to monitor movement, so it scores 1 on movement. It has 2 different monitoring methods, let's say camera traps and radio collars, resulting in a score of 2 for monitoring methods. For taxonomic diversity, in this example, the property has undergone an inventory of mammals in 2 different seasons and included a bird inventory, therefore scoring 3. It also had a big fire and acted towards mitigation, such as rescuing damaged animals, for example. Therefore, it scores 1 on ecosystem disturbance. Last but not least, in this example, the theory of change included 28 activities that can be implemented during the 5-year project timeframe. And during the last monitored year of this example, the property has implemented 8 of the activities, therefore scoring 8 in the project intervention item. Once all of this information is provided, the template spreadsheet automatically calculates the number of biodiversity credits. So in this case, almost 22,000 biodiversity credits would be issued. The next step is to fill in the information with all the costs associated with the biodiversity project during the year monitored, such as the team, radio collars, track cameras, fire prevention strategies, agroforestry for community, scientific and other partnerships, and other costs that the project may have. The spreadsheet automatically uses some percentages to calculate the buffer pool, Regen registry, and credit class fees. It also automatically adds the project profit margin, which will allow projects to increase and improve the number of activities that will be held in the next monitoring period. The total project cost is the sum of all these costs. So in this case, almost $600,000. The price per credit is the total project cost shared by the number of biodiversity credits generated. So in this case, $600,000 divided by almost 22,000 units. So in this hypothetical case, the credit cost would be $28 per credit. It's important to state, as Hannah mentioned in the beginning of this webinar, that this biodiversity protocol does not allow for buying and reselling units, and a unit cannot be sold for a higher price than the one calculated in this spreadsheet. This offers a fair viewpoint on the credit price for both the landowner who conserves and the buyer who is investing in conservation. So in the part 2 of this presentation, we will discuss the roadmap that ERA developed to implement a biodiversity project. As presented in the webinar 1, we developed a pilot project in the Pantanal in partnership with IHP, Instituto Homem Pantaneiro. The project was verified in March of this year, and the goal is to share the steps developed to achieve this verification and issue the biodiversity units. The first step is the diagnosis of the land, which involves a field campaign to identify and confirm the presence of the umbrella species in the area. In this stage, it is interesting to conduct the first taxonomic diversity assessment, which must take a minimum of 5 days according to the rules set in the biodiversity protocol. It also should include at least mammals and 1 season of taxonomic diversity. Here is one tip. The use of multiple monitoring methods enhances the project chance of registering the umbrella species and achieving a higher score in the monitoring criteria. Step 2 includes stakeholder identification and consultation, as well as the co-creation of the theory of change with the key stakeholders. The theory of change includes the analysis of the main threats, the design of strategic activities that will address the threats and the expected impacts, and measurable indicators to monitor results over time. For example, here it's a part of the theory of change developed to combat misinformation regarding the damage caused by jaguars to communities. For example, the project proponent can establish partnerships with universities to research the subject and propose science-based strategies. A possible indicator could be the number of articles published. For this step, it takes more or less 2 or 3 workshops with all the stakeholders involved. The step 3 includes formalizing the project development within the Regen platform and developing the project plan and the credit calculator, including the expected credit issuance. Official templates to streamline the documentation can be found at the protocol website, the QR code that we shared in the beginning of this presentation. Step 4 is the actual project implementation, where the project developer or the landowner implements the project activities as planned in the project plan and theory of change developed in steps 2 and 3. Key actions here would be to focus on data collection and management to ensure a strong foundation for monitoring reports and the feature verification, as well as the continuous improvement of conservation practices, which is a requirement of the protocol. After a year of actions implemented, step 5 begins, which is the development of the monitoring report and the umbrella species credit calculator using the official templates. At this stage, it's important to pay attention to data organization, such as field logs, camera trap data, raw data sets, attendance lists, stakeholder consultation feedback, appendices and photos, and all documents used as evidence for the verification period. Also, it's important to state that the Regen platform requires a mandatory public consultation period. So step 6 is the verification, which includes hiring, submitting all the documentation for an independent audit, and answering all the auditor's findings. The goal here is to be transparent and credible and ensure projects align with the Biodiversity Protocol and the Regen Registry Program Guide. For example, in the verification period for the pilot project that we verified in March of this year, this step had a duration of 4 months. So step 7 includes the steps taken towards credit issuance, starting by submitting all approved and verified documentation to Regen, which will do a completeness check, as Giselle just pointed in her presentation. And once approved, biodiversity credits are officially issued. For example, the Regen approval and credit issuance for the pilot project that we verified in March of this year lasted 2 months. At this point, it is vital to state that the project timeframe has a minimum of 5 years. So it's important to continue the project implementation to secure actions for the next monitoring period and the application of the Biodiversity Protocol. And finally, the step 8, last step, but maybe the most important one, is marketing and sales. What we are learning is that it is mainly connected with carbon buyers, but also connected with the buyer's supply chain. So if you're interested in the subject, webinar 2 will focus more on biodiversity credit buyers. Please register using this QR code below. Thank you all for listening, and it will be a pleasure to discuss any questions you may have.
Thank you, Audie. That was an amazing, clear presentation. So we really appreciate your clarity and effort there. So now I invite everyone to ask some questions, and we will answer them. So you can go to the Q&A feature on the top of the Teams meeting and put in your question. And we can start with Josh.
Great. Thanks, Anna. I'll take the presenter's privilege to have be able to ask my question in person here. I just was curious, and I'm not sure if I totally understood in the protocol about the presence of the umbrella species, if that is required like for the project area as a whole, or like on any individual given hectare, if that umbrella species is like has to be, if there has to be evidence of that, of a particular umbrella species on like each hectare within the whole project area, or just like within a certain range, or how that works. And I was just curious about that because obviously, like, there can be certain species that just use certain habitat niches or travel corridors or pathways where maybe like the whole area is important for the ecosystem as a whole, but maybe like the actual animal or the species, whatever it may be, is not going to be present in every single hectare of the area. So I wasn't clear on that, and it'd be helpful to understand that.
Great question. Yeah, so the animal umbrella species does not need to be present in any hectare or every hectare. So if the umbrella species is monitored using photographic or some evidence within the property, all of the habitat hectares get accounted for in the equation, because it's less about, you know, the umbrella species, obviously, but it's more about paying for the protection of that habitat and all of the web of life that that habitat offers, with the umbrella species being the proxy of you know, that biodiversity there. So yeah, great question though. Thank you. No more questions have popped up into the Q&A yet. So I'll give another couple. Oh, a new post. Let's see. Oh, here we go. I will read it out loud. For Olivia, in the protocol, what safeguards are in place to act against game playing, such as listing 100 interventions that are each minimal but make the numbers very big? Great question, Richard.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I understood. Maybe some against game playing, such as.
So when you develop the theory of change, it makes more sense to have a larger list of interventions so that you can score higher on the activities that you implement, because that's one of the parameters that increases the activities. So is there a way that the methodology prevents sort of creating a long list of interventions, but that are actually minimal in, let's say, impact?
Yeah, well, first of all, the theory of change recommends that you choose at least one threat and not all the threats that are that the project area faces. So you are gonna discuss with the stakeholders and understand which is the biggest threat that's happening in the area, and focus on activities that will fight that threat. There is no maximum list of interventions that the project proponent should have, but the theory of change should be redone every 5 years to understand what strategies were implemented and what needs to be done to maintain and improve the project activities.
Yeah, and ultimately everything is going to go through verification. So if the verifier sees that that intervention was nominal and your list is way too long, I think it's up to the verifier to also use good judgment on if that list makes sense and if those activities are actually generating impacts. So that's one way that you would sort of protect from sort of this game playing, as you say. And then ultimately, whoever's buying the credits will have access to all of your project documentation. So this notion of transparency plays an important role because it creates trust between buyers and sellers. So if, you know, I want to go on and buy biodiversity credits and I look at your list of interventions and your costs, I'm just like, wow, this seems like, you know, not aligned with what I believe, then, you know, I might buy from a different project. So there's that transparency level that also allows for good actors to stay good actors.
Yes, and also if the project proponent lists like 100 interventions and he has like 5 years to implement these interventions. So they score, if he implements 10 activities in 100, the score will be lower. So he has to be very intelligent on the list of interventions and what it is viable to the project to implement in this 5 year of project time frame.
Good one. So another question here. It's been a month since you've now issued your first credits. Have there been any buyers? If so, who were the buyers and what are their main motivations for doing so? Great question. We've sold around 1,000 credits. The buyers have been through the Regen marketplace. So they've been people accessing the project and, you know, purchasing credits. We don't know if they're corporate buyers or if they're just individuals. But we haven't made any large, you know, corporate sales yet, as we know it. So and the motivation for doing so is unclear, but I would expect that it's for, you know, supporting jaguars and the protection of them. But, you know, if you come to our third webinar, we're going to be talking more about buyers and the reasons and motivations that companies may have to purchase credit. So I invite you to that. Next question, 2 Indigenous entities asked if they can use traditional shellfish farming within Biodiversity Credits platform. Shellfish farming, it would not be eligible because we are sort of terrestrial. I don't know. Yeah, shellfish is kind of a mix between terrestrial and marine ecosystems. What would you say, Ollie?
Yeah, I would say if the community lives in a land and this land uses the river or something like that to the shellfish farming, this land would be applicable if there is umbrella species in the area.
Yes. And this goes into a good, you know, what is the spatial unit of a credit? So the spatial unit of a credit is 1 hectare. How does the protocol provide guidelines for monitoring large areas like 100,000 hectares? So in larger properties, I mean, the property that we used, we developed the Jaguar credits was 40,000 hectares. So there's no maximum limit of the, you know, area that generates credits. You just need to be able to show that you're monitoring properly in that area by applying the monitoring methods and the guidelines and the protocol. But there is no, you know, restriction on size. And for larger areas, you would just maybe need to set up a grid you know, format of sampling for camera traps. And there's a lot of technology providers out there that we could indicate that supports project developers, land stewards and project developers to set up really rigorous monitoring sampling plans. Great questions. Next we have, what happens with biodiversity credits issued now if in 10 years down the road the conservation work stops and the population of Avella species faces a decline? Does this just rely on the buffer pool established in the beginning, or how else would this kind of reversal be handled?
I would start, yeah.
Go ahead,
No,
Ali. This will be a tricky question.
Yes, I would just start saying that at this time, the biodiversity protocol states that is 5 years of project time frame, but this was a very big issue that we discussed a lot during the methodology development. We know that for conservation efforts and practices, we do need more time than 5 years, but we also know that biodiversity market is a new market. There is like few projects going on out there. So we want to facilitate the development of the first biodiversity projects, but we do also know, and this is written in the methodology, that at some point when the market's more mature, we are gonna improve this criteria and the number of years need to develop the biodiversity project under this methodology. Yeah.
Josh, you had your hand up. Was it a relation to this question?
Yeah, can I just chime in for a second on that? I think we're coming to the end of our time, but just 2 quick points. One is that you know, this question of durability of the outcomes is an important part of all considerations around biodiversity credits, and that's one of the key principles that are covered in the high-level principles for the biodiversity credit market in the publication that the BCA has done with IAPB and WEF, which I think, again, you can find the latest version on our website sometime today if it's not already there. But in the definition of the biodiversity credit also, I believe that we have indicated that there should be a minimum time frame of like 20 or 25 years. Not all projects and contracts and land tenure agreements go that long. So maybe, that's not a hard and fast rule necessarily, but then also just from a practical consideration, I would say, even if, biodiversity is dynamic, and even if there are changes to the outcomes at some point down the line, that doesn't take away from the value of those outcomes that have been maintained for the period that they've been maintained. So, even if there, is some decline at some point in the future, the extension of that population, or the maintenance of that population during that 10-year period, is still a great value. So it's one of the tricky and challenging issues around biodiversity credits, but there's been some thinking done around this and some principles in place. So the practical implementation is variable between different approaches.
Thank you, Josh. We are at time, but there's some still really great questions. There's one about buyers and, how can these claims be made? And I think we will touch upon that in our third webinar. So I invite you to join us. And I really appreciate everyone's time. And I will try and answer your questions before I shut down the webinar here. But there's one about Colombia jaguars. If there's no presence of a jaguar yet, to start the process, I would buy a camera trap and set it up and get some biologists to get a photo of that jaguar. So yes, thank you so much, everyone. I appreciate everyone's time and attention, and please get in touch if you have additional questions or want to, see how you can apply the protocol. We are here to help, and we are really wanting to support the growth of this beautiful market to protect nature and get to nature positive. So thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful day. We'll see you at the next webinar.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Hannah. Thanks, Ellie. Thanks, Giselle.
Thanks, Josh.